everyone, welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. My name is Shubham Sagar, and in today's daily news analysis, we'll be taking 5 articles of Hindu and Indian Express from 25th July 2024. If we talk about the first article of the day, which is on Hindu page number 8, Budget 2024, long on intent, short on details. As the name suggests, it is somewhat critical in nature, this particular article about Budget 2024-25 rather, and apart from the critical aspect, we'll try to look at the key terms associated with budget because those terms are important from both pre as well as mains perspective. If we talk about the second article of the day, which is on Hindu page number 14, that is talking about right to shelter. And here we'll try to see different Supreme Court judgments related to right to shelter. If we talk about the third article of the day, which is on Hindu page number 12, here we'll talk about UN Security Council. No progress on UN Security Council expansion. And here we'll be talking about the different aspects related to UNSC and how things are still the same, how the status quo is not helping either the developing countries or the developed countries. If we talk about the fourth article of the day, which is on Indian Express page number 21, here we'll talk about GM mustard. There's a split verdict on GM mustard. Judge Supreme Court bench, they gave a split verdict. And what was the reason for that split verdict? We'll talk about that. If we talk about the last article of the day, which is again on Indian Express page number 21, here this is a very interesting article, very important article related to environment, mitigation versus adaptation. Economic Survey 2024, that is 23-24, is talking about how we should be focusing more on adaptation rather than mitigation. On the other hand, developed countries are continuously stressing more and more on mitigation. We'll have a talk regarding that. We'll deal into that article. After all these 5 articles are done, we'll solve 5 prelims practice question and 1 mains question because as we have discussed earlier, practice makes a man as well as a woman perfect. If we talk about the first article of the day, which is budget budget 2024. And this article, as you can see here, long on intent, short on details it is talking about. So what is happening in this particular article? It seems somewhat critical, right? But it is, the critical aspect is one thing. The terms aspect are another. That means here we are interested in different terms because you keep on reading about different data, which I think you already have now because Pratik Shah yesterday has made a comprehensive video on budget. So more than all those data, we are here concerned more about the terms, like what are the different terms associated with budget? What is the revenue budget? What is a capital budget? What is revenue receipt? What is revenue expenditure? What is capital receipt? What is capital expenditure? What are the different components which come under receipt and capital bracket? Both receipt means revenue receipt, capital receipt. What are the different components under them? So there are so many different terms which you need to understand, or we as humans need to understand if we have to understand budget in greater detail. So we'll have a look at this particular article. We'll see the criticism, what they are criticizing and what are their points where they are not very happy with the budget, and along with the silver linings as well. So previous year question in 2021 only they have asked that there are different components of budget, capital budget and revenue budget. Inside this, there is receipt, there is expenditure. So explain the components of both these budgets, and it is not very far off, right? We are currently in 2024 and this question was asked in 2021. So we should be aware about these things, right? So budget 2024-25 speech. Also in GS paper 3, third topic is government budgeting. So we cannot ignore it and we should not ignore it. Data is one aspect, then understanding different terms is another. So budget 24-25, and one more thing, please understand. So currently we are in 2024. The budget which has been presented is 24-25. The economic survey which has been presented, that is 23-24. So please do understand this. Don't make mistake here because many people do make mistake in these things. They write economic survey also as 24-25. And why generally they are writing economic survey as 2023-24 rather than 24-25? Because economic survey is more or less evaluation of the previous fiscal year. What we have done right, what we have done wrong. So economic survey 2023-24, budget 2024-25. Now, more about the news, what this article is talking about, and then we will jump on to the important area, the very important component, that is different terms related to government budget. And that is not only confined to this year's budget. In every budget, you will be having these terms. So, Viksit Bharat, 2047 vision. So, we strive to be a developed country by 2047 rather, and government has outlined different priority areas, 9 priority areas they have outlined, and a long-term vision. So, that is actually a good thing. And they're also saying that the future budget should be adhering to these priority goals, to these areas. Then unemployment. Continuously you are hearing news about unemployment, that there is a vacancy of a lower division clerk or anything, and group D job, this job, and so many crore people, PhD people are applying for this. So many like issues of underemployment, disguised unemployment, structural unemployment. We keep on hearing about it, and government is now acknowledging it that yes, unemployment is an issue in our country, and government strives to address this issue. Fiscal continuity, fiscal deficit. Now again, there will be different terms. Fiscal deficit, primary deficit, effective revenue deficit, budgetary deficit. What are these terms? Once, if you're not understanding, now because you continuously hear about fiscal deficit, that government is currently trying to reduce the current fiscal deficit, which is at 5.1 to 4.9%. And by fiscal year 2026, we want to reduce it to 4.5% of GDP. That is fine. These figures keep on coming. But what does fiscal deficit means? And this thing will be clearer to you once this particular article is done. So government budget we are talking about. Revenue budget, capital budget. In revenue budget, revenue receipt and then capital receipt. So receipt means money is coming here. Expenditure means money is going outside. So receipt, money coming in, expenditure, money going out. Simple terms. So in revenue receipt, from where the money is coming? The tax revenue, direct, indirect tax money, non-tax revenue, dividend profit, interest loan. During the COVID time, if you're not wearing mask, the state governments, etc., were charging some fee. So all these things are going under revenue receipt. What will come under capital receipt? Loans. Let's say government is taking some loan. Then disinvestment. Let's say governments, sold some stock, or they like sell their particular shares in government-owned enterprises. So that is disinvestment, that will come under capital receipt. I'm just telling you some important components. Then revenue expenditure. Salary, pensions, defense, government is spending money. So that is revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure, when you are creating assets, you're creating roads, buildings and all these things, that will be capital expenditure. So hope you're understanding these terms. Now let's come to the different types of deficit. You have revenue deficit. So what does revenue deficit means? Again, go back. So revenue receipt, revenue expenditure. When your revenue expenditure is more than revenue receipt, then you are under revenue deficit. So hope you have to read both these slides one after the other. And then again come back. See this budget deficit. So here in budget deficit, you will combine both revenue receipt and capital receipt. You will combine both revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. So budgetary deficit means your revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure is more than your revenue deficit plus capital deficit, right? Fiscal deficit. See, in most of the scenarios, what government tries to do is they try to make their budget deficit zero. So if they have to make their budget deficit zero, then they have to do some borrowings. And that particular borrowing is known as fiscal deficit. So your expenditure is more than your receipt. So what you will do is government try to make their budget deficit, budgetary deficit zero. So to make it zero, they will borrow some money, and that borrowing is known as fiscal deficit. Okay. So when you're borrowing some money, then you have to pay interest on that money also. So sometimes, let's say BJP government has certain amount of debt, but some amount of that debt has been taken by the earlier Congress government, let's say. So they want to calculate what is their actual debt. So they will reduce the interest payment which they were paying on the previous debt. So your fiscal deficit minus your interest payment will give you the primary deficit. How much is the actual loan, reducing the interest component. Then trade deficit. It is related to your import and export, where your import is greater than your export. And current account deficit, it is related to balance of payment. In balance of payment, you have current account, capital account. Current account deficit means the current account component, you are like in that scenario, you are taking more from rest of the world than what you're giving to the rest of the world. So this is different from what other terms which we have read earlier. So hope some amount of things are clearer to you. Especially before trade deficit, whatever these terms you have read, revenue means budget deficit, fiscal deficit, primary deficit, all these are related to the budget part. So what are the criticism of the current budget? Reliance on private investment. The public investment, capital expenditure is more or less static. In some areas it has reduced, some areas it has increased. And government is relying on private investment, which according to the author of this article, it has not significantly increased in the previous years. Industrial sector, we don't have too many schemes catering to, let's say, railways. Education and health sector has not been given enough focus in this particular budget, according to the author of the article. And urban-rural balance. There is a continuous talk regarding, just like you have Manrega, which is right to work in rural areas. We need to have right to work in urban areas because unemployment is increasing. So urban-rural balance has to be maintained, and budget needs a better balance between urban and rural economies and clear distinction between jobs and internships. So what is the conclusion? More detailed and bold steps. If we want to be a developed country by 2047, we need more detailed and bold steps. That's what this author is saying, and we need to cater to these particular areas. If we talk about the second article of the day, right to shelter is a fundamental right, says Supreme Court. In different years, right to marriage, right to privacy, so many different rights have been asked by UPSC related to which particular fundamental right. So here we'll talk about right to shelter. Different Supreme Court judgments related to right to shelter. Under which fundamental right to shelter will come? Article 21, Article 19, means neither of them or both of them. So we have to see that, and we will try to understand what this particular issue is all about. So previous question, right to privacy is protected under which article of the Constitution? It has been asked earlier. So what is the context? Supreme Court has emphasized the need to balance railway infrastructure development in Haldwani, Uttarakhand with the fundamental right to shelter for approximately not one, not two, not three, 50,000 people accused of illegally occupying a railway land. So encroachment is bad. We all agree on that. But government is saying, and rather government, Supreme Court here is saying that still you should be respecting human dignity. Supreme Court is saying that we are not promoting encroachment, but we have to think about these people. If you're displacing them, where will they live? Right to shelter comes into picture here. So about right to shelter, we'll try to see Indian Constitution, different Supreme Court judgment, and then again we'll see more about the news, what Supreme Court was saying about this Haldwani matter. So right to shelter, fundamental aspect of right to life and personal dignity. Indian Constitution, Article 21, there is a Supreme Court judgment which explicitly says that this right to shelter will be coming under Article 21. But then we'll see some implicit versions as well. So Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, which has been interpreted by Supreme Court to include the right to live with dignity. This interpretation extends to right to shelter as an essential component of a dignified life. In fact, when you will see Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, you will see there are so many other rights which are included here. That means right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 is a superset under which there are various subsets and various rights, which is included in the subset, including right to shelter. But then there is Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause E, which provides the right to reside and settle in any part of India, which implicitly supports the right to shelter. Please understand this. Even in Article 21, it is not explicitly written that right to shelter is under Article 21. It has been included in Article 21 after Supreme Court judgment. Which particular Supreme Court judgment we'll just see in few moments. So there are different Supreme Court judgments on right to shelter. Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation, 1985. Legality. Again, similar kind of scenarios you'll be seeing. Some people have to be removed from a particular area, legally or illegally. In more often than not, they're illegally occupying that area. But again, how far we are violating human dignity in that case. So legality of evicting slum dwellers from their homes without proper rehabilitation. So what was the judgment? Supreme Court ruled that right to livelihood, which is integral to right to life, includes right to shelter. And it is government's responsibility to provide right to shelter. It's not their fault that they don't have the money. You have to provide them right to shelter. So eviction cannot be carried out without providing alternative accommodation or adequate rehabilitation. And that's why you see different Awas Yojana, Grameen and Urban, carried out by the Government of India. So KP Sharma versus Union of India, 1995. What was the issue again? The right to shelter in the context of urban development and displacement. People are getting displaced. Development is very much needed. And the court, what was the judgment? The court emphasized that right to shelter is part of right to live with dignity. It mandated that state must provide alternative accommodation. If you're displacing them from one place, locate them or place them at another place. That's your responsibility, because right to shelter is under Article 21 and Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause E. Then Chameli Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh, 1996. Here, Supreme Court explicitly said that right to shelter is a fundamental right under Article 21, stating that it is essential for a dignified life and that the state must ensure its fulfillment. And so, hope you are understanding this. If somebody asked under which Supreme Court judgment it was written that, or the Supreme Court gave the verdict that right to shelter will be under Article 21, the answer will be Chameli Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh. Then Lalita Kumari versus Government of Uttar Pradesh. Here again, adequacy of shelter provided to marginalized communities. Court observed that right to shelter extends to providing adequate and dignified housing for marginalized groups, emphasizing that the state has an obligation to ensure proper housing facilities. So if you or me does not have a proper housing facility, we are not to be blamed. State has to be blamed for it, because right to shelter is under Article 21 according to Chameli Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh, and it is also implicitly under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause E. So let's talk more about this news, Uttarakhand news. What was the issue? The court stated that while it cannot be harsh on the families, its decision should not be seen as encouragement for future encroachments. They are not promoting encroachment, but yes, human dignity is in question here. Right to shelter is in question here. So the hearing was based on a request by Railways to modify a 2023 Supreme Court earlier judgment that stayed a Uttarakhand High Court directive to evict the families within a week. If you're evicting them, rehabilitate them, give them a shelter. If you're not doing that, then it's not all right. State has a responsibility when it comes to right to shelter. So the court instructed, this is the conclusion, that the State Chief Secretary to collaborate with railway authorities and Ministry of Urban Affairs to develop a fair and equitable rehabilitation plan for the displaced families. If we talk about the third article of the day, UNSC expansion. This thing India has been continuously arguing along with the other G4 countries. So again, you can see the keywords here. Which countries are part of G4? And why is nothing happening on the UNSC expansion front? What are the prerequisites? If UNSC has to be expanded, permanent members has to be expanded, then what are the prerequisites? What is the criteria? So there are so many questions, the answers of which we'll be getting in this particular article. So UN and UNSC, UPSC relevance, GS paper 2, international relation, and let's talk more about this article. So previous question, discuss the impediment India is facing in its pursuit of a permanent seat in UNSC. Direct question 2015. And such kind of questions, just by changing the words, UPSC can ask in future as well, and they will ask in future. So context, what is the context? Despite consistent efforts by India and other countries, UNSC reforms has made no progress, status quo. The lack of progress has sent the subject of considerable frustration ahead of the Summit of Future in September 2024. So we'll be having a Summit of the Future in September 2024. Different world leaders, 150 world leaders will be discussing the plan because reboot is necessary. The world is not the same as it was in 1960s, 70s or during the Cold War period. The world has changed considerably, and means UNSC has to show more representation from Asia, Africa and South America. And that is what different countries are saying. G4 partners. Now here there is a keyword. What are the countries which are part of G4? Brazil, Germany, Japan and India. And these are the countries who, like Brazil, South America. South America has not been represented at all in UNSC 5 permanent members, right? So there is no African country as well, like in UNSC 5 permanent members. So there is very inadequate representation when it comes to UNSC. And then there are 10 members also, apart from 5 permanent members, who are elected for 2 years, and then the whole process gets rotated and repeated. So India and its G4 partners, they have expressed frustration over the stall process and the wording of the proposed Pact of the Future. Then there is a grouping of which Pakistan is a part, which is opposing all these UNSC expansion and all these reforms thing. So again, another kind of a tussle is going on, and we will be reading about it. So UN, international, UNSC, when we're talking about UN now, United Nations, UNSC is a part of United Nations. There are different permanent organs of UN. UNSC is one of the permanent organs. General Assembly is another. Secretariat, International Court of Justice. Then there are different specialized agencies of UN when we talk about other organizations. So there are different things, there are different components which you need to understand. Here, the important part in this particular slide is how many member states it has, 193. Then where is the headquarter? The headquarter is in US. Who is the current Secretary General? So these are some keywords, especially or more important from pre-perspective. 15 members it has, if we talk about UNSC now, and 5 permanent members. Just give me a second. Headquarter is in New York, right? So 5 permanent members. US, UK, Russia, France and China, and they have veto power. Veto means to forbid. So let's say that some resolution has been passed by US condemning the act of Russia in Ukraine. And let's say Russia only vetoed it or China vetoed it. Then that proposal will not go through. So veto power is a very powerful power to have. And it's not about supporting anything. It has negative connotation. Veto means to forbid. Like US has proposed something, China vetoed it. That means China is not wanting that proposal to go ahead. So veto to forbid. 10 non-permanent members elected by General Assembly for 2-year terms. UNSC has the authority to make binding decisions on member states. So UNSC, especially the permanent members, they have a lot of power, and who doesn't want power? But again, as they say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So India has to also, we have to see whether the power has actually corrupted these permanent members or not, these 5 permanent members or not. So the original permanent members were called P5. And at that time, Russia was not there. Soviet Union was the part of the P5, and then Russia inherited the seat after Soviet Union dissolution in 1991. So United Nations Security Council, France, Republic of China, now People's Republic of China, initially held by Republic of China, that is Taiwan, and then People's Republic of China replaced it. So Uniting for Consensus, this is a group of countries led by Italy that opposes the expansion of permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. And Pakistan is a part of it. So hope you can understand this. Pakistan is opposing all the reforms. They don't want India to be a part of UNSC permanent members. And that we can understand why they are doing what they are doing. Now, why the reforms in UN is a must? Static composition. UNSC's composition largely unchanged since 1965. Significant increase has happened in the UN General Assembly membership, but UNSC is still at the same place where it was in 1965. Lack of representation. We have just talked about this, that Asia underrepresented. Africa and South America, they have no permanent representation, which is actually a very sorry fact for both Africa as well as South America. Geopolitical rivalries. And there is a rivalry going on among permanent members, which has hindered the UNSC's ability to effectively address global issue. US, Russia, they're fighting among themselves, and that is not helping the matter. Inequitable power distribution. The veto power held by the P5 members allow them to block any resolution. We have talked about this, even if there is overwhelming support from other members. Emerging global issues. UNSC needs to address new challenges, economic interdependence, environmental degradation. Are they doing enough about it? The answer is no. Now, why all these things are at a halt? So that will be understood when you are understanding the procedure for amending UNSC membership. So changing the membership of UNSC requires amending the UN Charter, and it involves a consent of 2/3 of total UN membership, which is actually 66.66666667. That is a recurring decimal, including the concurring votes of all P5 members. So the criteria are very tough. And apart from this, if the P5 countries, they don't like all these changes, they can veto it. So you can understand how challenging these whole reforms are. 2/3 consent you need. You need consent of all P5 members. And then if any of the P5 members did not like it, they can veto it, making everything obsolete. So what is the way forward? Despite the challenges, India and its G4 partners must continue to push for UNSC reforms. Diplomatic efforts should focus on building broader consensus. We need to keep on working, and G4 partners have a crucial role to play in that. If we talk about the fourth article of the day, GM Mustard, two judges bench of Supreme Court, they had given a split verdict. So it is very easy to understand. Split verdict here means one judge had said something that we cannot release GM Mustard, other is saying that we can release GM Mustard, and there is a debate going on the environmental efficacy of GM Mustard, how safe it is us, or how safe it is for us to consume GM Mustard, right? Genetically modified crops. UPSC has already asked lots of questions on GM Mustard and like BT brinjal, BT cotton, so we need to be aware about this particular issue. So what is the context? Two-judge bench. Now here there is a term, constitutional bench of Supreme Court. 5 or more judges when they comprise a bench, then that is known as constitutional bench. So this is not a constitutional bench. And there is a saying also, let's say 5 or 4 judges bench, they gave a verdict. So if you have to, or Supreme Court has to override it, so the general convention is that it has to be more than 4. 5 judges, 6 judges, they can override a 4 judges bench verdict. I'm just giving you an idea. So here, in a way, science and tech and polity is merging. So two-judge bench of Supreme Court delivered a split verdict on whether to allow environmental release of GM mustard. Now, let's talk more about it. So CGMCP, Center for Genetic Manipulation of Crop Plants, you don't need to remember all these terms, just listen to it like a story. So they are sorting the approval, and they are at Delhi University, they are like that. We want the approval from GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which lies under MOEFCC, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And they want that we want to release DMH11, which is a variant of GM mustard, to the market because it has more potential. It has more yielding capacity, or what do you say? The productivity will be higher. It is more herbicide tolerant. So many different things are there. And that's why they were advocating for the release. Then GEC created a subcommittee. This is a government kind of a thing, taking its own time. Ministry of Environment sent the proposal back for re-examination. In the meantime, environmentalists were like, no, we don't want this particular GM mustard to come out. This is not environmentally sound. This is dangerous. It can create health issues. It can create different issues. And then this split verdict was given. So what are GM crops? So GM crops are plants altered by introducing genetic material from another organism, right? So you are taking some good genes, and there is gene editing technology also like CRISPR-Cas9 and all those things. So you are taking desirable genes to improve the herbicide tolerance, to improve the productivity. All these things, you want to do that. And that's what is happening in genetically modified crops. As the name suggests, genes have been modified by one technology or the other. The selected gene provides a specific desired characteristic like pest resistance, herbicide tolerance, improved nutrition, or increased yield. And that is Dhara Mustard Hybrid 11. This is the name of this GM mustard. About GM mustard, DMH11, originally developed by University of Delhi. We were talking about it, and it is genetically modified to be herbicide tolerant. Then there are certain technical terms here. It is created by crossing the Indian mustard variety Varun with East European early Hira 2 mustard. This can even remind you of like cow breeding. So different hybrid cows you have. So you have one Indian cow, you have European cow, you are mixing them. And then hybrid cow is there, and their milk giving capacity is more. Similar kind of thing you can understand here. Indian mustard variety, East European mustard variety, we are doing a cross gening, and from there, we are getting DMH11, which has 28% higher yield compared to the national check and 37% higher than zonal check. So the productivity will be higher. It will be more herbicide tolerant. So it's a win-win scenario. The only lose or lose-lose scenario is the environmental implications, the health implications, because of which we have seen a split verdict here. There are different types of GM crops: BT cotton, BT brinjal, DMH11 mustard, and GM soya meal. And all these crops, in some way or the other, are facing some issues. And BT cotton has been so successful. Once India was an importer of cotton, not like 10 years, 20 years back, but because of BT cotton, we became an exporter of cotton. So GM crops had some good things as well going for them. But environmental implications, health implications cannot be ignored, right? And now here are some key terms. We don't need to do PhD here, but there are certain keywords which we need to understand. So we're talking about GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. It lies under MOEFCC because sometimes they can like confuse you by giving that it lies under Ministry of Science and Technology, etc., etc. Don't get confused. It comes under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Then there is RCGM. There are different hierarchies are there. So RCGM, Review Committee on Genetic Manipulation, it comes under Ministry of Science and Technology. So just remember this Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, where does it lie, in which ministry it lies, and then there are different terms here like Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. When you will read environment also, you will read different protocols, different conventions, Stockholm Conventions on persistent organic pollutants. So even for pre also, you need to just understand it. Cartagena Protocol was associated with biosafety. Stockholm Convention was associated with persistent organic pollutants. Similarly, you have different conventions for, if ozone depletion, we played a crucial role. There was a convention, there was a committee, and there was a... so what was the name of that convention which played a crucial role in reducing the ozone depletion? If you know it, you can post it in the comment section. If we talk about the last article of the day, very interesting article. Economic Survey is talking something about mitigation versus adaptation. So in a way, Economic Survey, economy, and then mitigation, adaptation, environment. So you're seeing a merger between economy and environment. And mitigation, adaptation. What is the basic difference between mitigation and adaptation? While we are reading this particular article, different terms will come up like IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What is IPCC? What questions can come from IPCC? So all these things we have to keep in mind when we are reading this particular article. Previous question in 2017, UPSC has asked, climate change is a global problem. How will India will be affected by climate change? How Himalayan and coastal states will be affected by climate change? So these kind of questions keep on coming, and we have to understand different terms. Now, one thing I want to tell you, and I want to tell you again and again, that the current budget is 2024-25. So the economic survey will be 23-24. Keep this in mind. I'm reiterating it again and again because this is a tricky area. Most of the people will make mistake, and we have also understood why it is named Economic Survey 23-24. So global, and what Economic Survey 23-24 are saying is that developing countries will be they are majorly impacted by whatever global climatic efforts are going on by UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or CBD, etc. Because they are putting too much pressure on developing countries, and developed countries are flouting their targets. They're not meeting their targets, and they're focusing. Here we are talking about developed countries. They are focusing more on the mitigation part than the adaptation part. Now, what is mitigation part? Mitigation part, you can understand they're just focusing on the greenhouse gas emission, etc. Whereas adaptation is a much bigger feature, where we are thinking about climate change from so many different perspectives. Greenhouse gas emission is just one aspect of climate change. There are multiple aspects of climate change on which the adaptation part focuses on. So economic survey is saying that adaptation has to feature in these kind of global climate efforts. We cannot keep on focusing on mitigation. Both has to go hand in hand, and adaptation has to feature more in these efforts, right? So hence, they should focus more on climate adaptation rather than climate mitigation. What is climate mitigation? As you can see in this particular slide, these climate mitigation efforts are aimed at reducing or preventing the emission of GHG. But climate change is not all about GHG. There are different facets to it. So this involves a range of strategies and action designed to reduce the sources of these gases. Again, we are continuously talking about GHGs, transitioning to renewable energy sources, improving energy efficiency, sustainable land use practices. All these practices which you are seeing, they are more or less related to reducing emission of GHG. The overarching goal of climate mitigation is to establish greenhouse gas concentration to prevent dangerous anthropogenic human-induced interference with the climate system. Now, climate adaptation, a much bigger subset as compared to mitigation. It involves adjusting to current or anticipating climate changes to reduce risk and exploit opportunities. And when you are seeing action under adaptation, it is building resilient infrastructure, adopting new agricultural practices, managing water resources, protecting ecosystem. You can see so many facets. It's not only confined to greenhouse gas emission reduction. Effective adaptation requires supportive policies, community engagement, and integrating these measures across various sectors to enhance resilience. All in all, you must be understanding this. Climate adaptation is a much bigger phenomenon as compared to mitigation, which is very narrow in nature. So, key arguments of economic survey, not 2024, it is 23-24. It argues that current global climate action regime is ineffective and inequitable. It places unrealistic burden on developing countries. Developed countries started earlier. Like England, industrial revolution happened earlier. They have reaped the benefits of all those industrial revolution. Now, when we have started late, so obviously we have to speed up the process of development. So now they're putting too much pressure on we means developing countries. And that's what economic survey is saying, that it is placing unrealistic burden on developing countries like us by focusing excessively on achieving 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius temperature targets which they have. Survey criticizes developed countries for not meeting their emission reduction targets, and it also notes that IPCC has reinforced the narrative favored by developed countries. So all in all, there is a saying that history is written by victors or something. So developed countries, in a way, they are forcing the narrative upon developing countries, which is not good at all. So these scenarios are criticized for being unrealistic given the country's track records, these developed countries' track records. Now, here you are seeing a term which is known as IPCC. We'll talk about this. Who formed it? And like which organizations are involved? When was it formed? All these things are important. So key argument of economic survey 23-24. What is the key argument? What are the key arguments? Adaptation should receive as much emphasis as mitigation, advocating for rapid development and improved resilience against climate impacts. And it also proposes alternative pathways, including lifestyle and behavioral changes to address climate change more equitably and sustainably. Now, what is IPCC? We're talking about it in the previous slide. It is a United Nations body, specialized agencies. Now, this is your homework also. Try to see the different parts, like what is the difference between permanent organs and specialized agencies of UN. Established in 1988 by WMO, not UNFCCC, WMO and UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme. Again, this is just a question for you. If you know the answer, you can post it in the comment section. Where is the headquarters of UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme? One thing which you also have to do, which I keep on telling you again and again, that post your marks in the comment section. You will solve 5 prelims question, 1 mains question rather. So out of the 5 prelims question, how many you're getting correct? Please post in the comment section. So IPCC, WMO and UNEP is involved. 1988 is the year, right? Primary purpose to provide, and they publish reports, and they have published 6 assessment reports, which are considered the most authoritative sources of information on climate change. They keep on publishing reports. They keep on talking about anthropogenic changes, mass extinction of different flora and fauna, and we have to take these reports very, very seriously. Now we have done the 5 articles. Now it's your turn to solve 5 prelims practice question and 1 mains question. As I've told you earlier also, once you're done with these 5 questions, please post your marks in the comment section how much you're getting. Even if you're getting 0 by 5, this will keep you disciplined if you keep this practice going. So please post your marks in the comment section. First question in front of you related to IPCC, which was the last article which we did. Pause the video, try to solve this. First statement, wrong, because it was not UNFCCC, I've just told you earlier. It was WMO, World Meteorological Organization, if I'm not wrong. So just eliminate 1, you will get the answer, and the answer is 2, 3, 4. You don't even need to, even if you're not knowing 2, 3, 4, and you just know, UNFCCC is not involved in the formation of IPCC, you can easily solve this question. The answer is B. If we move on to the second question, difference between climate mitigation and adaptation. So again, pause the video here. What is the major difference? The major difference is climate mitigation focuses on reducing GHG. We were continuously talking about how narrow it is in its approach, whereas climate adaptation involves adjusting to climate changes to reduce risk. If we talk about the third question, which permanent member was the last to join the P5 group? United Kingdom, People's Republic of China, France, or Russia? Now, here there is a debate, and you can pause the video here. Many people will write P, that is People's Republic of China, because we were saying that before this, Republic of China was there in 1971, etc. After that, People's Republic of China got involved, and they were the last to join. But USSR also was dissolved in 1991. So Russia was joined in 1991. So either of B or D, if you have opted for either B or D, the answer is correct. So don't worry about it. Right? So please keep these things in mind when you are solving it. This was a tricky question. Even if you're getting B or D, any of the answer, take it as the right answer and accordingly post your marks in the comment section. Consider the following statement regarding the right to shelter. The right to shelter is explicitly mentioned in Article 21 in Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation. Just read these statements. What is the answer? First statement is wrong. It is not explicitly mentioned. It was given by Supreme Court judgment. So you can eliminate A. Olga Tellis, Supreme Court ruled that eviction cannot be carried out without providing alternative accommodation. It looks correct, right? Keep it in the loop. Supreme Court decision Chameli Singh affirmed that right to shelter is a fundamental right under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause E. This is wrong. Article 21. So the answer here is B, only 2. Consider the following statements. Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, statutory body under Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, which is again wrong. And the committee is responsible for appraisal of policies or proposals. So you can again, whenever you're seeing the question, just pause the video. The first statement is wrong. It is under MOEFCC. So eliminate 2. Second statement is a general statement. Correct statement, the answer is B, 2 only. Now if we come to means practice question, critically evaluate the key aspects of budget 24-25. Here, it is critically evaluated. So you will do the criticism, which has been done in the first article, which we talked about. So you will talk about budget 24-25, how we are talking about Viksit Bharat at 2047, right? And all these things. So you will talk about how India is trying to reduce their fiscal deficit target, how we are acknowledging unemployment is a major issue now. So these are some good things. And then you will talk about the bad aspects. So body will be Viksit Bharat, unemployment recognition, fiscal continuity. India want to reduce it to 4.9. And by fiscal year 2026, we want to reduce it to 4.5. And then criticism, reliance on private investment. That is a major issue. Private investment has not happened much, but we are still relying on private investment. Public investment is more or less stagnant according to the budget. Lack of industrial initiative, we have talked about it. Railways, not much has been done in this budget. Education and health sector, to a certain extent, has been ignored. Urban-rural balance, we have talked about this, and these parts you have to focus more on when you are solving this means practice question. And in the last, the conclusion part, that yes, budget lays a foundation for Viksit Bharat 2047, but we need more detailed and bold steps where we can focus on industrial sectors. Here you will write the solution of all the criticism, all the problems which you have stated earlier. Strengthening education and health sector, ensuring balanced urban-rural development, and all these things you can focus on here, right? So that's it for today's DNA. If you liked the video, do like, share and subscribe. And please post your marks in the comments section, and that will help you be more disciplined. Take care, be blessed, see you soon.